The Ultimate Factoring Series, Lesson 6C, Trinomials of the Form ax squared plus bx plus c, the box method. In case you haven't watched either of the other two Lesson 6s yet, Lesson 6A, 6B, and 6C, all three show the exact same types of problems. In fact, they're the exact same examples. So you don't have to watch all three if you don't want to. They actually are just three different methods to solve the exact same type of problem. So this isn't part 1, part 2, and part 3. It's three alternate methods for solving the same kind of problems. So if you are someone who likes to just have one method, if you watch just one of those and you're like, I like that method, I'm going to use that, you can move on to Lesson 7. If you feel like you need to see it another way, then you can watch one or all three of the videos. What's different about these problems from Lesson 5 when we first introduced trinomials, that's things with three terms, is this right here. In Lesson 5, we only had 1 in front of x squared. It was always just x squared out front. The coefficient was just 1. For these problems, we're going to have coefficients other than 1. Now, for the box method, we use a box. I know, shocking. So over to the side here, set up a box with 4 parts. And for the box method, you put the first term in the first box, upper left, and you put the last term in the last box, lower right. Make sure you carry the signs with them if they have them. The next step is to multiply these two numbers together. You can just do the number part, so 2 times 15, and that gives me 30. So I'm going to list all the values that multiply to be 30, and I need to figure out which of those, we know they all multiply to 30, but which of those will add up to a negative 11. Okay, well that would only be 5 and 6. So what I do is I put a 5x and a 6x in the remaining two boxes. So a couple things I need to say there. You have to put x's on those numbers every time. So you always, that's part of the process. You put x's on whatever numbers you find add up to the middle number. Also, it doesn't matter which one goes there. So these are completely interchangeable. If you wanted to put 6x in the lower left and 5x in the upper right, it would give you the exact same result in the end. So it doesn't matter where those two go in those two boxes. But we do need to check our signs because they need to add up to negative 11x. So to make 5 and 6 add up to negative 11, they both need to be negative. So now our box is set up. In my opinion, the hard part's over. The next step then is to look at your columns and go up and say, okay, what do these two numbers have in common? What do 2x squared and negative 5x have in common? Well, the only thing they have in common is an x. And then you go up the other column and say, okay, 15 and negative 6x, what do they have in common? Well, they have a 3 in common. And I like to say that with the box method, signs are contagious. Whatever box you're touching, you take that sign. So since the 3 is touching the negative 6 box, it's going to be negative. Okay, now let's go across the rows and go left. So I need to look at negative 6x and positive 2x squared. They have both a 2 and an x in common. As you go across the bottom row, 15 and negative 5x, they both have a 5 in common. And again, your signs are contagious. Since the 5 is touching the negative 5, it'll be negative. So my answer for this is x minus 3 times 2x minus 5. Next example, 4n squared plus 17n plus 15. We set up a box with 4 parts. We put the first term in the first box and we put the last term in the last box. Then we multiply their two numbers together. 4 times 15 is 60. And there's a whole bunch of numbers that multiply to be 60, as you can see me writing here. We need to figure out which pair of those numbers, we know they all multiply to be 60, but which pair add up to 17? Well, there's actually two. 3 and 20 can make 17, and 5 and 12 can make, 17. 3 and 20 can make 17, and 5 and 12 can also make 17. So we have to figure out which one's right. Well, let's think for a second. It would have to be a negative 3 and a positive 20. And those are going to multiply to be a negative number. So that's not good because we want to multiply to be a positive number. Or actually, 60 is what we're going for, excuse me. Negative 3 times 20 is negative 60, and we need a positive 60. So 3 and 20 are not going to work. We want to use 5 and 12 because we can make them positive and positive. They add up to positive 17, multiply to be positive 60. So that's it. So I put 5 in and 12 in, and they are both positive. If you want to put a positive sign, you can. That's up to you. But they do both need to be positive. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter where you put the 5 and the 12. You could have swapped these. It wouldn't make any difference to your final answer. So now, we go up the column and say, what do 4n squared and 5n have in common? That would just be n. What do 12n and 15 have in common? That would be 3. And since the 3 is touching a positive 12, it will be positive. Now we go across the rows. 4n squared and 12n have 4n in common. 15 and 5n have 5 in common. Since 5 is touching a positive 5, it's positive. So my answer is 4n plus 5 times n plus 3. Next up, we have 3r squared minus 16r minus 12. So I set up my box that has 4 parts. I put the first term in the first box. I put the last term in the last box. So this time, 3 times negative 12 is negative 36. We need to keep in mind it'll need to multiply to be a negative 36. And there's lots of different factor possibilities for 36. We need to figure out which one can give us a negative 16. So it appears that 2 and 18 can do that for us. So we need to think about the signs. 2 and 18, to make a negative 16, it would be a positive 2 and a negative 18. So I put a positive 2r and a negative 18r in my boxes. Don't forget to put a variable on those. They need to have r or x or m or whatever variable they're going with. Those middle terms have to have the variable. So then I go up the column. 2r and 3r squared has r in common. Negative 12 and negative 18r have a 6 in common. And since it's touching negative 18, it's negative. So I want to make sure I'm being clear. It doesn't matter. The issue is not whether both the terms have a negative in common. The issue is only what box you're touching. The signs are contagious. So since 6 was touching negative 18, it does not matter whether this is negative or not. It only matters whether this is negative. That's what made it a negative 6. Now we go across. 3r squared and 18r have both a 3 and an r in common. 2r and negative 12 have a 2 in common. And since it's touching the positive 2, it will be positive. So my final answer is 3r plus 2 times r minus 6. Next up, 6a squared minus 13a plus 6. For the box method, we draw a box with 4 parts. We put the first term in the first box and the last term in the last box. Then we multiply those two numbers together. 6 times 6 is 36. They have all those numbers that multiply to be 36. We need to figure out which one will add up to negative 13. Okay, negative 13, we would have to use 4 and 9. So to get a 4 and 9 to add up to negative 13, we would need a negative 4 and a negative 9. So I put a negative 4a and a negative 9a in my boxes. Remember, negative 4 times negative 9 is positive 36, and negative 4 plus negative 9 is negative 13. So that all works for us. Moving up here, 6a squared and negative 4a have both 2 and a in common. 6 and negative 9a have a 3 in common, and since it's touching the negative 9, it's negative. 6a squared and negative 9a have a 3 and an a in common. 6 and negative 4a have a 2 in common, and since it's touching the negative 4, it's negative. So our final answer will be 2a minus 3 times 3a minus 2. Final example, 35m squared minus 22m plus 3. We make a box with 4 parts. We put the first term in the first box. We put the last term in the last box. 35 times 3 is 105. It has the terms 1 and 105, 3 and 35, 5 and 21, or 7 and 15. The only ones of those that will add up to negative 22 would be 7 and 15. To add up to negative 22, they would need a negative 7 and a negative 15. So I put a negative 7m and a negative 15m. I go up first. Doesn't actually matter, but we'll go up first. 7m and 35m squared have a 7 and an m in common. 3 and negative 15m have a 3 in common, and since it's touching the negative 15, it's negative. Now we'll go across. 15 and 35 have a 5m in common. 3 and negative 7m don't have anything in common except, of course, everything has 1 in common. And since it's touching negative 7, it's negative. My final answer is 7m minus 3 times 5m minus 1. So that is the box method. Again, if you like that method and you want to just stick with it, great. If you feel like you'd like to see some other ways to approach these problems, you can check out one of the other 2 videos, either Guess and Check or Bottoms Up.